Hi, welcome. I'm Héllen Távora. I am one of the instructors at Fox Observatory and also Didactical Coordination. And today we have here Lisa Jackson. She's a librarian and supervisor for youth services in the library division. And she works at the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the library. That's awesome. We actually visited before and we brought some of the telescopes there. And also we're going to talk about astronomer that it's very important for the cultural history of the United States. And his name is Banneker. So we're going to talk about a little bit about him. But first we start with Lisa Jackson. And she is going to talk a little bit about the library. So I have some pictures that I can show and share with everyone so we can actually have an idea about the library. And Liz is going to talk a little bit about the library. Lisa, you take over and then I will just change some of the pictures and you can talk about the library.
Okay, fantastic. Hello, again, my name is Lisa Jackson and I'm Supervisor of Youth Services here at the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. The library itself opened October 26, 2002 and became the third library of its kind in the United States. Libraries similar to this one are the Schomburg Center in New York City and the Auburn Avenue Research Library in Atlanta. What makes this library different from the other two is that we circulate our materials to the general public from a collection of more than 80,000 books, artifacts, and documents. This $14 million, 60,000 square foot facility is the brainchild of the former Broward County Library Director, Samuel F. Morrison, who envisioned a place where African Americans could learn about their heritage. On the first floor, there is the Cultural Center, which has a Friends bookstore and Friends gift store. We have a large museum space, and in the picture, it's to the left behind that window on the bottom. We have a state-of-the-art auditorium that seats 300. And the auditorium is really fantastic because not only does it have the huge stage area backstage, we have dressing rooms for the stars. There's 2 stars dressing rooms, a huge dressing room for the rest of the cast of whatever play or group of people that are performing. There's a green room backstage and working bathrooms and showers. So it's a full complement of rooms that help those who are doing any types of performances at this facility. They can rest there and they can use those facilities back there to help them when they are doing their program. Here's a picture of outside of the building. This is how we all met. We periodically, we all meet and we look at the sky and try to find wonderful planets and stars and all kinds of cool things. That's my favorite part. So on the top floor of the building is the library proper. There's an adult reference section. There's a youth services section and our special collections, which houses rare books, artwork, and artifacts from people of African descent from all over the world. The most popular part of our special collections is the special collections revolving around Esther Roll, who played Florida Evans on the show Good Times back in the late 70s. She's from Pompano. And so we have a lot of her materials here. We have her Emmy in the collection also. Lots of good things. We also have an unfinished manuscript from the author of Roots, Alex Haley. his last manuscript that is unfinished is here. Youth Services has a wonderful collection of artwork from illustrators who have won the Coretta Scott King Illustrator Award, as well as a lot of images from Ashley Bryan. This library is important to the community, and it's important to the Broward County community because of its collection.
So then we are waiting for the Broward County opened, and then when it's safe for everyone to be looking through the telescopes, and we restart some of the events that we can do with the telescopes. Now we have two institutions that can help that. That will be Fox Observatory and the South Florida Amateur Astronomers Association. And also now we have the Broward Astronomy that will be part of those things. So we can see each other face to face eventually.
Yes.
Then because of the library gave us some of ideas what to present to commemorate the Juneteenth that is going to be on Saturday, the next Saturday. The library gave us some of the inspiration to find important historical people to talk about. And because of the, the help that Lisa gave to us, and also bringing links and the bibliography, we had an idea to talk about one of the important astronomers in the history of the United States. He's not just an astronomer, he was also helped with the surveying the land that became Washington, D.C. And so because of the African American Research Library, we have access to information that normally are not totally open to the public, or people don't know much about it. So it's a famous astronomer. He happened to learn about astronomy not short after the American Revolution, and we became the United States of America. So I thank to Lisa and thank to the library, we had the inspiration to do a presentation about Mr. Banneker. I am like in love with him. I had no idea about it. All what he did, who he was, and the opportunities that he lacked, but even without the opportunities, the fight that he got to acquire knowledge. So I really thank you, Lisa, because this is really amazing what you're talking about. Thank you to Lisa to give us the idea and the bibliography to research about Benjamin Banneker. So he born a little bit before the American Revolution, and he became an astronomer after the American Revolution. He was a free slave, he born free, and then because he was a landowner, he had opportunities to, not just toil, and he had time to, and then he was, educated by his grandparents, at least a grandmother and mother. So thank you, Lisa, for, pointing out Benjamin Banneker, because this man was a genius and he was like amazing. So first, he worked to combat misconceptions that people had about African Americans during the colonial era of the United States and right after the American Revolution. He was autodidactic polymath, meaning he learned by himself. He had very, very little schooling, but he became a polymath. He paid attention in math and natural sciences and astronomy. He also had lucky enough to be a landowner, so he had time to dedicate to his research in knowledge, reading books. He was an avid reader, and he was a mathematician, and he was an inventor and craftsman. He was a land surveyor. Also, very important, he was an abolitionist, and he used his publications to actually, talk about the abolition. And well, we are our basic interest, because we are both amateur astronomers, we are talking about also his talent to be an amateur astronomer. He was actually, he became professional astronomer because he produced books about it. So yeah, he made money of it. So he was a professional.
I just said that his case is a very unusual case in American history, but it's just amazing, and it's wonderful how it all came together and turned out.
Yes, yes, he was amazing. So Benjamin Banneker, born in 1731. His mother was Mary Banneker, and his father was Robert. Robert was a freed slave, and then he assumed Mary Banneker last name, but he changed a little bit, so he became Banneker. So the family became Banneker. There are two conflicting accounts of Benjamin Banneker ancestry. One is that his grandmother was African American, and the other one that she was a white slave that came from the United States as a bonded slave. But because those two problems to know, because there is no documentation. A lot of documentation was lost during a fire. So so that there's those two conflicting accounts of the history of Banneker. So Molly Welsh was a former servant, and when she acquired her freedom, she married a slave that she bought, Banneker, and then it says that he was royalty where he came from, and then they became landowners. So she had her land and she bought Banneker, and then later she married him, and then they became landowners, and then they had many daughters. And then Mary was one of the daughters who was mother of Benjamin. So from Molly Welsh was, the only accounts that they have was from the descendants who are, have the, just giving their deployments after, long time after the death of Benjamin and the death of Molly. So it's no documentation to actually prove that she was actual white bonded servant, a milkmaid that some people say, or if she was African American. And then, according with the Molly purchased Banneker, and then they had a farm located near Baltimore. So in 1737, Banneker was named at the age of 6 in the deed of his family in this family land, because they were afraid that because of his color, it could give trouble for him to inherit his farm. So that's why they put his name on a deed. And then basic Banneker had very little formal education, because back then you have like just primary school to learn, the simple operations and learn how to read. And then after that, when you grow enough to help in your farm, you have to go and work on the land. So that's basic how very little education. There was Quaker schools nearby. So there's some documentation saying that Banneker was sent to a school, and he learned to read and arithmetic and some stuff in school. But also there are records and that he learned to read and with the Bible by his grandmother. So there is a lot of conflicting accounts that you can have there. It says in one of the accounts that people say there is no actual documentation that about the age of 21 or 22, depending what account you're reading from the diverging biographers, that Banneker construct a wooden clock. So those two models that you see here are something that was around that time that could have been the kind of clock he constructed. So the account is that he borrowed a pocket watch, and he made to scale the gears, and with his knowledge in arithmetic and his knowledge in geometry, he actually made a clock that it said that worked until his death, like basic about 50 years that the clock work and struck on the hour precisely until his death. So what the accounts came about is that in the area where he lived, he was one of the curiosities of the wild region. That's what they said about him. So then a little bit later, like near to the age of 40 to 50 years old, is when Banneker took a long time to actually find people who like science, who like knowledge. So they had the Ellicotts, a Quaker family, a very famous Quaker family, that they came from Pennsylvania and moved to Baltimore. And then they established a grits mill nearby. So because of his intelligence and the accounts that he was a man of letters, he wrote stuff, and then he did, then he became friends with the Ellicotts. The whole family was people who liked knowledge, who studied, who read. So he finally found like people like him to actually exchange knowledge. So George Ellicott was an amateur astronomer. And because he was an amateur astronomer, he lent some of his books and some of his instrument to Banneker. And then by the age of the year that he turned 58, he forecast his first eclipse. So it's between 40s and 50s, he started to get interested in astronomy. So he made his own calculations. This is the first calculation for the first eclipse. And this is the diagram for another eclipse that he put in some of his books. So here's his calculation. So someone who barely have any formal knowledge became a very good astronomer, just reading books and having people who actually exchange knowledge, exchange books. So that's why it's very important, the libraries, because the love of reading, the love of acquiring knowledge by yourself at your own leisure time, it's something beautiful and something that he was an example of human being that, not just because of the difficulties of his life, and he became a very knowledgeable man because he read books. So then, because of the friendship with George Ellicott, George actually introduced Major Andrew Ellicott, and he was one of the surveyors that actually construct the Washington, D.C. So because of that, they made the Resident Act. So they were going to construct the whole capital of the United States near the Potomac. And then Major Andrew Ellicott actually invited Banneker to help in his surveyor group. And then for the first time in his life, Banneker ventured more than 10 miles out of his farm. So that's the first time he came out of his farm. He's already in his 50s when he actually started to working, in astronomy, and later on help a little bit during the surveying of Washington, D.C. That is a lot of accounts about how he helped. Some people say that he helped to remember how the whole project, because one of the architects left the project, but there is no documentation about that. But we know by letters and by some documentation that he was paid $60 as expenses for him to go to help in Washington. And also that he was paid $2 a day for his salary to work there. He worked for 3 months. So because of that, people started noticing him on the news that he was helping to construct someone and then using that as ideas for abolition. So in the Georgetown Weekly Ledger, Ellicott is attended by Benjamin Banneker, an Ethiopian, so you see the way they wrote there, whose ability as a surveyor and astronomer clearly proves that Mr. Jefferson's, the future president of the United States, concluding that the race of men were void of mental endowments was without foundation. So they started using the figure of the Benjamin Banneker to actually prove that all men is equal. All men with the same opportunities can be as intelligent as anyone else. So this is some of the pictures that you find here. This is on the left is a picture of mural of Maxine Spellbinder. The building of Record Deeds, there was a mural there. This building doesn't exist anymore, but there are some pictures saved in the mural. So here's Benjamin Banneker, and here he's helping, you know, during the surveying of the land. And then the Secretary of State, Major Thomas Jefferson, commissioned Major Andrew Ellicott to actually do the survey, and then Major Andrew Ellicott asked Benjamin Banneker to help in doing that. So he was paid $60 for the expense to travel, and also he had $2 as salary, the daily salary to work there. He worked only for 3 months. So what it says of some of his biographers that his duties were making astronomical observations and calculations to establish base points. So where you're gonna put the base points, like you know, the square of the city to be constructed, you know, do that so you can put down the city and the project. And then you have those boundaries, putting like stones, like those that still exist today. And then you know how to project the city, to put the city on paper, and then later on put on the land. So that's how they did the surveying. So to make those stones, you need astronomical observations. And also Banneker had the function to maintain a clock. So he maintained the clock and did the astronomicals based on the time. So he could put, you know, latitude and longitude of the markers on the land, so you would know perfectly how to project the city. So this is a picture of Major Andrew Ellicott, and then those are the markers, and this is one of the murals commemorating the foundation of the city. So then later in the same year, in April 1791, he had to come back to his land because spring was arriving, and also because he was working on his astronomical calculations for his almanac that he was producing. So he needed to go back. So basically he worked for around 3 months or so, helping doing the surveying of the land to put the future capital. So going back to his work as an astronomer, this is the first edition of his almanac. So today you can still find the Farmer's Almanac, and there are places that you can read what is going to happen today, every day for the whole year, and you can know the position of stars, the position of the planets, the moons and settings and risings, and you know the sun settings and risings. So this is very, very complicated calculation. And him, at that time, 1792, he actually did an almanac. So it's a very complex calculation. I cannot do any of those calculations. That's a very, very advanced astronomical calculation for you, especially if you don't have a computer, like I have the luxury to have a computer to do that kind of calculation. He didn't have it. He only have his observations and, you know, some of the instruments and measuring the angles to actually produce a very detailed ephemeris. So positions of objects in the sky with his simple instrumentation. So that was his first publishing. And then the interesting about those publishings, not just the position of the stuff that you see in the sky, it also have a pamphlet kind of thing. So a lot of people publishing their ideas. They did recipes for home remedies. They did advocacy for the abolition. And so there is a lot of things that they did that. Now, a lot of people who put out the foreword for his work, put like words that they are admiring Benjamin Banneker. So one of those things that people say is like, I consider this Negro a fresh proof that the powers of the mind are disconnected with the color of the skin. And then the funny thing is that this annoyed him because he wants people judge his work, not use him as a token for the abolition. Because for him, his ambition, his idea is that his calculations were correct, and because of that, he wants respect as astronomer, not because he would be a token for abolition. So, and at the end here, here's what he says: I am annoyed to find that the subject of my race is so much stressed. The work is either correct or not. In this case, I believe it to be perfect. So he was kind of annoyed by people actually doing the foreword and, doing the all the exaltations of this. And all he really wanted is, be classified as an astronomer who did corrections or did correct calculations of that. So this is the second book. And then I actually put a little bit of this for you to actually see a little detail. So that's the second year. And then 1993, so that's the second year. And I want you to just take a look here on the bottom of the middle page. So you see the positions of the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, the Moon, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And then 12 years before, a new planet was discovered. So the name of the new planet was Georgian Sidus, that became later named Uranus. So this, it's kind of cool because you actually see Georgian Sidus would be above Saturn. So he's actually named the new discovered planets only 12 years before. Now I choose June because of, the date, the month, but this is June 1793. And then you can see here what is happening in every day, in the day of the week, and then the number of the days that you can see the details. And then you can see rises and sets. By the way, you see here, but a typo, the S's were substituted by an F. So it says rises and sets. So this is for the sun. And then you see the position of the moon in each constellation, and then settings and risings for the moon and, the phase of the moon. Over here is the phase of the moon by day. So you have the 30th day or 29th and 30th day of the moon would be the new moon. And then the cycles start all over again. You would have the full moon about 15 days. So you would have the full moon. So this is like little details that, some of the position of the planets in which constellations here. So you have the phases of the moon. So this is a really detailed thing for that time, for any man to do it. But he didn't want to be compared because of the color of his skin. He wanted to be compared with other astronomers by the knowledge, by the skill that he did in his predictions of the positions of the objects in the sky. That's what we call it, the ephemeris. So now, because of this almanac that he did, is what's also a pamphlet. a lot of people wrote forwards, wrote letters. So from this year, I found important to publish because he got annoyed by the comments that, because of the color of skin that's extraordinary. He didn't like that. And he became annoyed, and then he got tired of it, and he decided to communicate directly with Thomas Jefferson. He was by then Secretary of State. And then he wrote a long letter from Jefferson. Jefferson was a slave owner. And then he was commenting that, in the Declaration of Independency, they were asking for freedom for all the men. So here, Benjamin Banneker uses the own words of the Declaration of Independence to pull Jefferson's ear, to stop with, to abolish slavery in the United States. So in the very long letter he wrote, he actually mentioned, we hold this truth to be self-evident. You see the change of the S. We hold this truth to be self-evident. So this is one of the words that we have in the Declaration of Independence. And then the comment is that all the men is equal and then need to be treated. And then he also published the answer of Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson sent him back a very short letter that he basically dismissed and didn't went to detail. He just like a perfect politicians that we see nowadays that give an answer that is a no answer. And then he just, to stop the conversation. Look how short is his letter. This basic two little paragraphs. Mm. And then the only thing that he did is that he found very admirable what he did. And he sent his almanac for the Academy of Sciences of Paris. And then, just basic to dismiss that. A lot of people comment that this was basically dismissal and let's not talk about. And right after that, they start landing slaves and paying to construct Washington, D.C. with a slave power, because people who own slaves actually, rented their slaves to actually construct the city. So instead to actually help with that, he totally dismissed and did nothing about it. So the other thing is that in his almanac, the predictions of eclipses, so this is very impressive. There is another publication here. So this is the 1795. And then here, a Philadelphia edition. And then they put a picture. So a lot of people thought that this picture was kind of drawings of the picture of Benjamin Banneker. So some of the models and some of the new drawings were based on this. But then later, some of the biographers concluded that this was idealized African-American youth and not really the picture of Banneker. So that is not sure if this is a picture of Banneker or if it is an idealized youth. So we don't know how he actually looked like. So some of the pictures that you see and some of the models of how he would look like is basically using this picture. So we don't really know how he looked like. We are not sure of that. So this is one of the latest on that. So then Banneker kept a series of journals with his dreams, observations that he did about natures. And so this, most of the documentation, most of the stuff was lost in a fire. So Banneker had only one of those who escaped from the fire. And then in this one that escaped from the fire, that was in the day of this funeral. So he actually mentions the broods that's happening right now, the cicadas that we are seeing happening today, during this month. We could even see the pictures of the cicadas in Washington, D.C., the X brood. is actually happening right now. And then Benjamin Banneker was recollecting in this only surviving notebook that he had, that his recollections of the brutes coming every 17 years in this. So it's interesting, the synergy that we are having talking about him during this time of the year is when the brood is happening, and the only book that survives is actually mentioned something that's happening right now. So I found it really cool, the coincidence where we are talking about him and one of his books and one of his notebooks and talking about that. So this is really, really cool. Now, he also mentioning about the behavior of bees. So he was interested in astronomy, in natural science, in agriculture, in irrigation. So he was a full polymath. He got curious about all kinds of science. So on the October 9, 1806, Banneker died. In his farm in Oella. So during his funeral, this is a model of how his house would look like, was destroyed during his funeral. This was really weird. People don't know how it happened. Nobody figured out what happened. The only thing that's really sad is all the stuff that he had in his house was lost. Only few things survived that was landed to other people, or some of his friends who have some of his stuff that survived. Very little stuff survived because while it was during his wake, during his funeral, his house caught fire. So this is a weird thing that happened. And then the daughter of George, Martha Ellicott, she wrote many biographies of Benjamin Banneker. She actually met him and talked about him. So that's one of the recollections that we have about him and know about him is by the daughter of his neighbor, George Ellicott, the amateur astronomer who taught him a lot of things. And then the other stories that came from John Latrobe that interview many of his friends and acquaintances and collect some of his histories about Benjamin Banneker. But he was a really impressive man. Benjamin Banneker interactions with his friends and people who he knows, so like from abolitionists like Rittenhouse or slave owners like Jefferson, show that even freed Blacks never escaped the confines of race. While he was rightfully being held as an example of African-American excellence, Banneker presence is an ideological crossroads. His persistence also make his story definitely American, with no qualifiers. So basically, he didn't like to have, there is a qualifier because he's an excellence, because he's an African-American. That actually annoyed him. He wanted to be remembered, and he wanted people comment about him by the prowess of his intelligence, not the color of the skin. And even people who actually exalted his intelligence, he didn't like that because they always put a qualifier, the African-American intelligent man. What he wants is to be an intelligent man. Doesn't matter which kind of qualifier. So that was really impressive. Thank you so much, Lisa, to introduce me to Benjamin Banneker. If it wasn't you, I wouldn't even know his existence. So, I'm confessing my own lack of knowledge of important people in the United States. So that's a very, very impressive man. By the way, this is another drawing of him. It is the idealized drawing. We actually don't know how he looked like. But here is some of the bibliography that I collected, some of the places that I use for this presentation. The best one, my favorite one, is the one that has the White House history, that has all the explanations based in documentations about him and explain some of the myths. And then this is a picture of one of the stamps that has his picture, a drawing about him, and him doing the surveying of the Washington, and some of the pictures that he dressed as a Quaker. So this is one of the stamps. We might even try to acquire one for the library. That would be an awesome idea.
Yes.
And then now we're going to have a little discussions and talk about things about, humanity. And I have like a few comments later on. Okay, so I'm going to go and just show you a little bit more thing than to actually talk about Juneteenth and interesting things that I found it. So it opened up what we're going to talk about, as a free conversation. So this is the Juneteenth flag, and is also related to astronomy. So the star is not also meaning that the last state where you have the Union soldiers coming to talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. So that's the star. And also it represents the free Americans and the future, and the star that represents the rest of the Americans, the freedom of all the 50 states in America. And then the burst here is an outline of a nova. So this is like also, a star that's like explosion and expanding and feeding new materials to in space to form new planets. And in the meaning of the nova is the representing a new beginning. So that's kind of interesting, the relation. And then the flag is not a straight line, it's actually a horizon. So it's a curved horizon. So it means that new opportunities for African Americans in the future after the proclamation of the emancipation. And then the red, white, and blue is the American flag, and also the date when the soldiers arrived in Galveston to actually tell everyone the good news. So this is one of the things. The other thing related to the same thing is Polaris, the North Star. I took this from the National Parks website. So this information is one of the links. And then it shows the Polaris was the Freedom Star, because when people want to escape from slavery, when they want to leave, bondage, they actually try to escape, and they need to go to north where freedom was. So they actually use the Big Dipper or the drinking gourd and use the last two stars and point to the North Star, Polaris. And so this is basically pointing exactly north. So if you follow the star, you are walking towards to freedom, going to the north. So I found this really beautiful. And another thing that we should, discuss a little bit about, the ideas of freedom and the ideas of opportunity, equal opportunity to everyone. So, right. Lisa, do you have any comments or anything that you want to talk about Juneteenth or Benjamin Banneker?
Well, it is very fitting that we talk about Benjamin Banneker during Juneteenth, because he was sort of living the way that people of African descent, African Americans, wanted to live at the time. So, I just wrote a few notes from your presentation. It's really interesting that there is no picture of Benjamin Banneker. I didn't think about that, but and there probably is not an illustration or some type of artwork, a drawing of his face. So it's just kind of, it's like, wow, I wonder what he really looked like. And maybe someday, 100 years from now, there will be some new technology that allows us to see what he looks like. I love old pictures, and so it just kind of bugs me that I don't know what he looks like. And I did want to remark on his beautiful, gorgeous handwriting. I'm from the old school where, we took penmanship class and we learned how to write in cursive, and it's beautiful.
I actually did that during the pandemic. I actually learned how to use that. I don't know if you can be able to see it. Like I kind of learned.
Not with your green screen.
Yes, my green screen is putting
Uh,
like, I actually tried to learn how to do, yeah, it's not appearing. So it took me this year to actually, because I found it beautiful too. I actually bought like a
like
fountain.
calligraphy. Did you get the
Yeah,
calligraphy pins?
I did that during the,
Oh, man.
one thing I did that was useful during the pandemic.
I'm sure you did more. Uh, so let's talk about Juneteenth.
Okay, yes.
Juneteenth is a happy celebration. First and foremost, it is a celebration of freedom and a celebration of hope. At the time when the soldiers, the Union soldiers, finally got to Galveston, Texas, and those last group of folks who were enslaved learned that they were free, it was just a wonderful, wonderful event in American history. It was a time of lots of hope. People were thinking about all kinds of things, what they could do, what they could be in life, the things that they could accomplish and could acquire. It's just a wonderful celebration. And that's why we hope that the entire country celebrates Juneteenth, because really it's a testament and a testimony to all of Americans' wants for freedom and for good life and for self-determination, or Kujichagulia, as we say during Kwanzaa. So that's why I really love this holiday. And so the holiday is not just for people of African descent, it's for everyone, because everyone is being affected by it. As we can see, Benjamin Banneker had all these great skills. He was super bright, a genius, many would say. Imagine how many other people who were enslaved had that same ability had they been given the opportunity. So, it sort of is something that can tell us today, living how we're living now, that we really need to give all children an equal chance to thrive. The human brain is a wonderful thing. Most kids have a natural curiosity, and you can help them learn, help them be more curious by reading to them, by looking at the stars, all kinds of interesting activities that you can do to help children become more curious, because that's what we need. We need children who are curious, who want to learn, who want to make a difference. So I really enjoyed learning about the different parts of the flag, the symbolism. It's like kismet that we're talking, because it's like Benjamin Banneker, Juneteenth, the supernovas. I mean, just all of this just fits together. And then
the locusts coming in the same time.
What a coincidence. Can you believe that?
Yes.
That's
it's like
crazy.
Awesome.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Yes.
So I love the fact that you brought up the information about the flag. One thing I would like to add to that is that Juneteenth celebrations are typically feasting, time to feast. And some people say that because at the time, folks who were enslaved, they did all of the cooking, but they only were able to eat the scraps. And when I say scraps, I mean things like pig skin and snouts and things that just weren't delicious that they had to eat. And so when we celebrate Juneteenth, we eat rich foods that the enslaved could not eat. One of the favorite drinks is strawberry soda. That was soda. It sounds yummy, doesn't it? And it was a soda, a drink that whites could drink, but the slaves could not. And so that's just a matter of just having everything that you couldn't have before and remembering and celebrating. Ways that we can celebrate are to harken back to those days, play games like the 3-leg race, tug of war, get your friends together and play old style games, do barbecue cookouts. I've seen places that have a Mr. and Miss Juneteenth celebration where the children either do performances or they read poetry, and they are chosen one boy and one girl to represent the Juneteenth future. So there's lots and lots of ways to celebrate Juneteenth. I just encourage people to get out, learn about it, and celebrate, because it's a fabulous part of our American history.
Yes, yes. So it's basically like another 4th of July. Juneteenth and 4th of July will be the same kind of celebrating freedom.
That's it.
Yes, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. So.
Yes. Yeah, that's awesome. The other thing that I kind of comment very fast, so just one more things for us to comment, is that one time I was on Big Cypress, and I was having an astronomy event, and some of the rangers on Big Cypress, they were commenting about Polaris. Polaris is the North Star. And then I had no idea that the North Star was the Freedom Star. When the lady was explaining that they used to locate the North to escape, I was like bawling. I was crying because it was a beautiful story, because I only knew as a star, as actually it has a double star. It has a, another one together. But all I needed was the astronomical data about Polaris, and not really the historical meaning, the feeling, the freedom, I was so like emotional for me to listen to that, to learn about that part of the history, because I didn't go to high school here. So I have a lot of historical deficiencies in my knowledge. And then when someone told me that, I was like, oh.
Well, I'll tell you, I did grow up here. I was born here, and it was never, the two were never connected. We talked about Polaris, which was just Polaris. They talked about the North Star, but they never connected the two. So when you talked to me about it, it was like, oh, that's right. This was just last week when you were talking to me about it. And it just came together in my brain at that point. Polaris is the North
So
Star.
if you want more information about that, if you search Polaris, the Freedom Star online, or if you use the links that will be on the video at the end of the video, you can look at the whole reporting and some of the pictures talking about Julia Tubman, and so you can read with a little bit more detail the meaning, and that is even the song about it. So it's to commemorate the escape to freedom. It is a really beautiful story that I love that.
Yeah, I do too. Very cool. And I have to thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Okay, so concluding that, thank you so much, Lisa, to explain Juneteenth and say that's a happy celebration. Thank you also so much to introduce me to Benjamin Banneker. I am in love with him. He is super genius, awesome. And then if you want us to do anything in the library, Fox Observatory or Broward Astronomy, just contact us. Feel free to contact us. And then if you have any events or anything in the library happening, please tell us, because it would be a pleasure to when we finally, see in person again.
Well, I would like to thank you for contacting me. This has been really a fun chance to talk about Juneteenth. I don't know that enough people know about it, so I'm so glad that your followers will be learning about it. I appreciate learning new things, and this has just been fantastic. I would like to thank you all both of you for coming to the African American Research Library. When you do, to expose our children to the celestial wonders that we have above us that we sometimes don't look at, and inspiring a whole new generation to look up and look to the sky. I appreciate you guys.